7 kings, 7 crowns, and every single one of them died believing the throne would finally give them peace. Congratulations, you're a Targaryen king, dragon blood, absolute power, the whole realm bent to your name. But peace was never part of the deal. Then the crown collects its price anyway, one king at a time, in ways stranger and darker than the last. And here's the thing, none of these are the deaths you've already heard 100 times. No mad king, no molten gold, no dragon devouring anyone in a throne room. These are the king's history quietly buried, and honestly, some of these are worse than anything you've seen on screen. Ask yourself as we go, if you wore one of these crowns, which ending do you think would have found you? Aenys Targaryen. He was handed the Iron Throne the easy way, born into it, first true heir instead of conqueror. Congratulations, you inherited an empire without lifting a sword. Except an inherited throne comes with inherited enemies, and the realm never forgave him for being gentle in a family that only respected fear. Rebellion after rebellion broke out under his rule. Men who'd bent the knee to his father refusing to bend it to his son. He spent 5 straight years trying to hold a kingdom together with kindness instead of dragons, and it wore him down to nothing. In 42 AC, worn out, humiliated, and grieving a son already lost to violence, Aenys simply gave out, his heart failing quietly in his own bed, a broken man in his own home. No blade, no fire, just exhaustion, dressed up as a king's death. If you'd inherited a crown you didn't earn, surrounded by enemies who only respected your father, would kindness have been your strategy too? Or would you have ruled through fear just to survive? And that's one of the nicer ones, believe it or not, because the next king on this list did everything right, and it still cost him everything that mattered. Jaehaerys I Targaryen, the Old King. 55 years on the Iron Throne, longer than almost any ruler in Westerosi history. Peace, prosperity, roads and laws, and a kingdom that finally stopped bleeding. Line 1. This should be the one Targaryen success story where the ending is soft. Then, except the price of that long reign was watching almost everyone he loved die first. His chosen heir, his own son Baelor, collapsed and died suddenly from a ruptured gut in the middle of a normal day. No warning, no battle, just gone. And here's the thing, Jaehaerys had already buried multiple children by then, and the one loss that finally broke something in him wasn't a war. It was silence in a hallway where his son used to be. He died in 103 AC, old and mostly at peace, technically. Except old age doesn't erase 40 years of funerals you weren't supposed to attend. Would you trade 55 years of peace and power for a life spent burying almost everyone you loved along the way? Or is a shorter reign worth it if it means dying before the worst of the grief arrives? You'd think the family finally learned something from him. They didn't. The very next king proves the crown doesn't care how good you were to earn it. Viserys I Targaryen. Warm, well-loved. The king who actually held 2 dragons worth of family loyalty in his hands, and somehow still lost control of everything before he was even in the ground. Line 1. A slow illness begins eating away at him in his final years, something the maesters can only describe vaguely as a wasting sickness. Then, except it isn't quick, and it isn't merciful, his body rots by inches for years, losing fingers, losing strength, losing the ability to even speak clearly in council, while 2 factions of his own family circle the throne he hasn't even vacated yet. He dies in 129 AC, quietly, almost forgotten in the noise of what happens next, because the moment his last breath left the room, the family he raised turned on each other so violently it nearly ended the entire dynasty. If you knew your own death was about to trigger a war between the people you loved most, would you have spent your final years trying to stop it, or would you have looked away, the same way he did? Well, that's what they wanted you to believe, that his suffering was the tragedy. It was just the warning shot. Baelor I Targaryen, the blessed, a king so pious the small folk practically worshipped him instead of the gods he prayed to. Congratulations, you're the most beloved Targaryen to ever live, adored by every corner of the realm. Except devotion like that doesn't stay healthy forever. He began fasting for weeks at a time, punishing his own body in the name of faith. Convinced the seven demanded suffering as proof of loyalty. And here's the dark part. Some in his own court suspected his own uncle quietly let the fasting continue longer than it should have, watching a starving king slowly disappear rather than stepping in to stop it. In 171 AC, Baelor the Blessed simply starved to death in his own bed. Aegon IV Targaryen, the Unworthy, where Baelor punished his body, this one destroyed his the opposite way. Decades of excess, gluttony, and cruelty left him bloated, diseased, and barely able to walk by the end of his reign. Then, on his deathbed in 184 AC, dying slowly from infection and rot, he made one final decision that would outlive him by generations. He legitimized every single one of his bastard children with his last breath, a single sentence that planted 5 separate wars into the future of his own family. Wars his descendants would still be fighting decades after his body was already ash. If you had one final sentence left to speak before you died, and you knew it would start wars nobody alive yet would live to see, would you have said it anyway, just to spite the family that never respected you? Aegon III Targaryen, the Dragonbane. He survived the worst civil war his family ever fought and lived anyway, which might be the crueler fate of all. Congratulations, you get the throne everyone around you died for. Except he inherited it as a traumatized child who'd watched dragons devour people he loved, and he spent his entire reign making sure his family would never again hold that kind of power. He outlived every dragon his family owned, hence the name, and after 25 quiet years rebuilding a kingdom his relatives nearly burned to nothing, he died at just 36. Officially it was illness. Unofficially, even his own court quietly suspected poison followed him to the very end, the same way it followed nearly everyone in this bloodline who ever sat that chair. If you'd survived what he survived as a child, would you have spent your whole reign guarding against the very power that made your family feared? Or would you have wanted the dragons back, no matter the cost? Aegon V Targaryen, the Unlikely, a fourth son who was never supposed to inherit anything, who somehow ended up wearing the crown anyway, and honestly, for a while, it looked like this family had finally produced someone who deserved it. Then came Summerhall. Desperate to bring dragons back into the world, Aegon gathered alchemists and dragon eggs at his family's summer castle to attempt a ritual nobody fully understood, chasing power his ancestors had already destroyed themselves chasing. Something went catastrophically wrong. The castle went up in flames so violent it burned through stone, killing the king himself, his own son, and dozens of others trapped inside walls that became an oven in minutes. No dragons were born that night, just ash, and a mystery historians still can't fully explain a century later. If you knew your entire family had already been destroyed chasing dragons once before, would you still have lit that fire, gambling everyone you loved on the same obsession that killed them the first time? So here's the pattern, laid bare, one final time, a broken heart, a lifetime of quiet funerals, a slow rot nobody could stop, a starving king nobody saved, a deathbed decision that started wars, a poisoned reign spent hiding from power, and finally, a fire so consuming it took an entire family down trying to reclaim what killed all of them in the first place. 7 kings, 7 completely different ways to lose everything, and every single one of them believed, right up until the very end, that the crown was still worth it. So tell me honestly, out of these 7, which death do you think you could have actually avoided if you'd made one different choice? And which one do you think was coming for you no matter what you did? Fight it out in the comments. See you in the next one.